Hey there, guys. Okay, so there's an entirely new system. The previous system and all those videos, I'm really sorry if you watched hours of them. This is entirely different. It is considerably easier and it is way, way, way smaller. I'll actually show you that first, even though I didn't intend to. Um, you may remember previous missions, if anyone had played them, that they'd come down and they were huge. Yeah, like look at these 12 megs. And those were actually the smaller ones. That was actually after I had like compressed it a good deal because some of them I had were like above 4 when compressed. Well, now they're tiny. Now they are like half that size. And this has all the same functionality and it's so much easier to use. You can just really kind of like put units in there. We'll get there in a second, but like you could really just like put in a unit of tanks and like it just instantaneously works. And the way that it works allows like all this variation, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. But on this video, we're mostly just going to go over the top level system. So it's called Automata because everything just runs on its own. It requires as little wiring as possible too. That's the big change over the previous. The previous, you still had to do a good deal of private wiring. So in this one, there's basically a top level component that's kind of like thought of as the like overall battle, and it's like how things can move through. And basically everything at this level, as it's set right now, only one of these runs at a time. And so this allows a battle to move through phases. These can exist right on top of each other, like they don't have to travel across land. So like it could be a situation where in the first phase of the battle tanks are out, and in the second phase of the battle like whatever trucks and anti-air trucks are out. But they operate independently of each other. In other words, when one of these succeeds or fails, it moves to another one, and this allows you to translate through battle. So this one has 3. They're all called generic battle because they're all super generic and they're all precisely the same. They're both very basic. Both sides are the same, and we'll talk about the insides in just a moment. So essentially, what happens is that this mission is set to always start. One of these guys looks like this. That's it. It's this group, which has a whole bunch of crap in it that we don't care about at this level. It has a thing that says activate, and that turns this one on. Deactivate. Now, deactivate, if there's nothing going on, turns it off. If there is stuff going on, it tells everything in there to run, like to basically go back to base. And when things go back to base, they effectively deactivate themselves. Additionally, as soon as deactivate hits, this section no longer sends signals. And the signals come out over here. There are 4, and it's just success on Russian side, fail on Russian side, success on German side, fail on German side. And that's really how you control these things. So like that's it. So all the stuff in here you configure so that you ultimately say, hey, the Russians succeeded, and if that happened, you do this. You do whatever these guys attribute themselves to. In this case, it kind of makes sense. It starts, if the Russians win, it starts the phase. Actually, if the Russians win, it starts the phase down here. The Germans are moving up from the south upward, and the Russians are pushing them back down. So as the Russians win, it moves this direction from this phase, where there's a battle right here, to this phase where there's a battle right here, to this phase where there's a battle right here. It's actually right where these icons are. And then we can talk about the insides of these now. So now you get the basic idea. Each one of those is a generic battle. These are all perfect copies of each other, except for their location. So when you go inside one of these dudes, you really just get a few items, but they're pretty complex inside them. So this thing gets inputs of kind of like you would expect. I don't have these things named well yet. Activate. I'm working on that. The activate. Um, and this I haven't actually entirely decided how I'm going to control yet. That's one of the reasons we're kind of alpha, because there's a reason for all the little components inside this that we're about to talk about to start in a sequence. But right now they all start together, and that reason is that silly message server mission overload. That's that reason. And so then these guys have the same exact outputs, because this is really just kind of like a wrapper that allows me to like put other things in here. It's just for organization. So this one doesn't do a whole bunch in and of itself. Inside it, it has units, and this is where we start getting some real meat. So it has the air for Russian and German. Abreast really just means like this is such a general setup. This is like a setup for like this is how you would load this. I'm gonna have a package all packaged up, and all these things are gonna be in different little modules too. you would load this and then you would convert it into the kind of mission that you wanted. So like right now, there's just like 2 units that move on the ground in an abreast manner. That generally means tanks, but like you could put any units in there you wanted or anything. It just means that it's configured to run the units in an abreast manner. And we'll talk about what all that means in a second. These run the units on the ground in a column, and these are artillery units, German and Russian. What's inside them we'll talk about a little bit later. Here's some airfields. They are controlled by this too, and we'll talk about that in a second too. And then there is the controller. And so if you had watched some of the previous videos, I basically kind of divvied up that brain and put little parts of it in each of these units. And so this controller controls both, this is like the Russian controller stuff, and this is like the German controller stuff, kind of. These guys are like everybody's, but we're not going to talk about them at all, except for their effects. And this thing just is our counter. And what this does is this decides like which side is winning. So like if you remember from that top level at the generic, it was success Russian, fail Russian, success German, fail German. So this effectively makes that decision. And the way it does is it keeps a Russian score and it keeps a German score. On this mission, they're set to start both sides at 2. Effectively, like it's A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4, with A being winning. And the way that it works is as whatever your win or lose conditions, and you get to set those, and that's again, that's like a slightly later discussion, but whenever your win or lose conditions inside this specific battle are, and that could really be anything. It can be the death of units, it can be the success of units, like they make it back to base alive. It could be specific ground targets, like a factory or a base gets destroyed. It could really be anything. But as one side starts to win their various battles, you need to have more than one, or you need to have one that can repeat itself. As it starts to win these battles, it will increase in score. But this score kind of moves up and down. There's certain things that can drag it back down. And what ends up making you win generally is by hitting all the way to the top or all the way to the bottom, depending on what your conditions are. On this battle, it's incredibly simple. It's really just when the other side loses units, your side gets points. And like that's kind of it. But that's really just because I wanted to test all this stuff, and that makes things move through as quickly as possible. These also control... these levels control what level your air bases are at. So you can see that. And there's also an indicator on the map itself that tells you what level your side is at for whichever active phase. The thing called generic battle is a phase. That's probably the terminology I'll use for it. Because it's active by itself, and then the next thing's active by itself. It's very phase-like. So these dudes over here, which we're not really going to talk about much, these are like the controls for each little unit itself. So like this is the control, all those controls we were looking at before was like for the whole side. It was like the column, the abreast, the air units, all of them together, how this system thinks about it. This part is how the system thinks about each individual unit. Like this is specifically the German column. And this over here just maintains that there's only X number of units active. In this case, I think it's 12. And so it says this unit in this part of the map will always have 12 units active. And like when it runs out of units, we're going to try to add reinforcements in a reasonable manner, so you don't just get like 1s and 2s trickling in. That still happens, but I'm trying to battle that, so it's like only big groups coming at a time. It also controls the level of the units. So the ground units have this cool feature where they actually, of those 12 that can be active at once, each one of those 12 could be one of 4 different types. So like it could be 4 levels of tanks, like 4 different types of tanks. In fact, that's exactly how this abreast German is. In fact, I'll show you. There's the A unit. These guys are like, for when your units are doing their absolute best, like they have succeeded at their mission multiple times, they'll start getting these A units. So these are like heavy tanks. That's generally what they should be. No, I do this a little differently. I have the A units for the tanks be light. Because they move quickly, and the more likely when you come back to your base is when you succeed, at least in this mission. And then the heavy tanks, because the idea is that when you're in A and B, you're being aggressive, and when you're in C and D, you're being defensive. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in just a second. I know that I'm going into a reasonable amount of detail inside these, but it's really just to tell you what the overarching thing is, and so I'm just going to walk through that one more time as we come back down here. The overarching thing is we have 3 phases in this mission. I could copy and paste this and make it be 4. Each time you add one of these, the mission does get bigger. I haven't really tested many more than this. But since I was making missions that were literally 3 times the size before, I think that would work. But you do get that situation where it takes a long time to unload. Anyway, 3 is a lot and has a lot going on. And so like this area will be active, or this area will be active, or this area will be active, just as we discussed. And this just takes activate, deactivate, and just reports to the world whether or not you succeeded in or failed in Russian, or whether or not you succeeded or failed explicitly in German. This follows, for people that like this kind of thing, it's modeled after a concept called a continuation, which is a functional programming concept where you just pass messages through things, and that each individual item has no actual knowledge of the outside of it, or really of the insides of it. And that's what allows this to happen, where I'll show you here in the units. As you'll get groups, you can actually just copy and paste these. So like all these units are sitting here working together, interacting with each other and whatever, and I could just copy and paste units and be done with it. Additionally, each one of these, I'm going to have to do a little bit of mussing with the groups because I set them up for a different configuration. I would really love, I think that someone asked on... actually, I'm going to mess with this other one over here because I care less about it. We're functioning correctly. I think that somebody asked for the ability to kind of like move things around over here on this tree, and like I totally agree. Like grouping and ungrouping, and additionally, an undo, like an undo and a redo would be like, oh my god, so amazing. So like I'm obviously just like moving these things around because like it really doesn't matter. I'm going to go ahead and ungroup this. We're just going to look at these kind of big. So I'm going to show you how these. I'm actually just going to make these little packages that we're going to that I'm going to send out to you. The map area I don't care about. And so this lets me show you a layout of units a little bit too. I'll turn the map on so that we can see them a little better as I pull them apart. Here's an abreast, and you'll see that this is like 10 abreast, and they move forward and backward. But each one of these is actually 4 totally independent units, which stand for their 4 levels. Only one of these will be active at a time, just like the phase. This is how the continuation concept comes in. Like this is like it's a mapping concept, and only one at a time is taken. And so only one of these will be active at a time. And for this default mission, it's dumb, and they are all in exactly the same place, but that makes it be like the easiest to test, if you know what I'm saying. And you probably do. Okay, sorry about that. I gotta figure out what I'm doing. Yeah, so that's the abreast. And so yeah, you get the idea. Those are just the units straight up. And so what I'm going to show you is that abreast R, and I'm going to go find the controls for abreast R because I don't remember these things are. Right here. Did not mean to take that airfield with me though. But it doesn't matter, we're not really going to use this mission. So this unit right here is abreast R, and this thing all by itself runs all by itself. It doesn't need anything but these inputs and these outputs. And so this will give you 4 vehicles that work like tanks effectively. 4 sets of 10 vehicles that will always be active. And all you can say to it is deactivate, deactivate. You can make it be tougher, like you can make it move towards A explicitly, or you can make it move towards D explicitly. And it will tell you if it succeeded or if it failed. And then in here, if you guys ever want to make your own of these, all you have to do is make sure that this thing somehow sets success or somehow sets fail. For abreast, and by the default settings, and you can change these at will, it's if the tanks make it all the way back home, then they succeeded. Otherwise, if they die, they fail. And that's it. And so you can kind of set those little settings. And so you'll end up getting these modules where you'll be able to for real, I'm going to copy this and paste it. And all I have to do is hit activate. By the way, something happened on the recent update, and copying and pasting can take forever now. I don't know what's up with that. Even if just like a single, like you can just grab one timer. It doesn't always happen, but whatever. So like right now, all we have to do is hit that activate, and this is a working, operating. They're going to move back and forth and behave appropriately. Like when they get attacked, they can run. Um, they have all kinds of settings and all kinds of things that they react to and behave around. And as you tie all these together, they interact with each other, making each other raise and lower in levels. And so you end up with effectively a flux where it moves from one phase in like, so this mission is set up precisely. If you don't mind, I'm going to reopen the previous one. So I didn't need to make those changes. Although I will be sending you guys like with all these little packages. So you'll have like a package that's like air units. And the way I have the air units set up right now is that when they're on A, they're like PE2s or HE111s. Like those are like vulnerable planes, but they do the mass destruction of the ground. And when they're on B, they're like the IL-2 and the Stuka. And then I think they're like 190s and LA5s. Then maybe I think I put the I-16 in there just for fun. Yeah, I-16 versus like F4s. Somebody's gonna die. So, so there's also the one last unit I want to talk about that's in here. Are these columns, because these columns are set up and they'll move along roads, and they're designed to move along roads, and so they'll just make these column units that move along roads, and these guys are support. Each of these things, since they can each report success or failure, tie to each other, and I have them tied to each other so that when a column succeeds, when a tank succeeds, it allows the column, which is a support unit, so like the tanks just succeeded, when the tanks are like really winning, that means the area is clear and the support units can come in, and the support units will be improved by the tanks succeeding. And as the support units succeed, meaning that they are generally, what that means is that they're moving supplies from one part of the map to another part of the map, they'll improve the airplanes and allow the heavier and heavier bombers to go up. So you're very, very heavily motivated to keep your units alive and keep them succeeding at their missions, because as these guys succeed, it improves your score, which allows your airfields to improve and then moves you towards the phase closer to you winning the battle. So this one always starts right here in the middle. It starts right here, and it's very evenly balanced, and I played this maybe, I don't know, 30 times, and it really, like, it goes one way or the other. It seems right down the middle of who wins, Russians or Germans, when it's just the AI. And if this middle battle is won by the Germans, then it'll move up here. It'll move up here to the Russian area. If this upper area is then won again by the Germans, then the whole mission is won by the Germans, and it moves on to the next battle. And that's controllable by this win condition or lose condition. If instead the Russians manage to pull it back here, then they'll move back to this position. But when they come back to this position, it'll be in the state very similar to what it was like when they were here last, meaning that they'll probably be at a disadvantage. And they'll really need to fight to come back. But then if they win there, then they'll make it to this position here. And if they can beat the Germans here, and here it'll be even again, then they'll make it to the win condition. And it can just continue to volley back and forth. And the mission will just keep on going. I have had it crash a few times when it's really deep in. And I'm not really sure what will happen when a whole bunch of people get on it. I think that's probably about it. That's a good overview. I'm going to put up actual packages that have links to them and show you how, like, for real, you can just start playing with it. Like, you can just drop in an airplane module. You can just drop in a tank module. It's like a quick mission. Like, you just throw in 3 of them, hit activate to all of them, you know, like, just like that. Like, activate, 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 and load it up. And that's all I got. Have fun.